It's been shortened by corporate America to International Women's Day, but we want to remember the class question as well. Right? We get feedback. All right, and we've got it. Thank you. And I would lift up, a couple of ancestors on that walk just to think about some names you may know, some names you may not know. Since we're talking about black and brown unity, there are two incredible unsung heroines in the epic fight against the slave trade in the Caribbean, whose names you may not know. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Carlotta Fukula, right? Or Solitude from Guadalupe. Right, two brave revolutionary ancestors who fought against slavery in their respective islands. Right, so if I were doing the libation on International Working Women's Day, I would start with those women just to set us off. And if I was in the Black Panther Party, I would now some of my comrades who are now ancestors, Janet Cyril in particular, right, who was a big influence in the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party, Safia Bukhari Austin. Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army was very interesting. Right? I just want to give you a quick run of the show. The mayor is going to be moderated. Great Fred Hampton said we're going to fight racism with solidarity. So today we're going to have a conversation about solidarity as an antidote to a modest problem that we're starting to see that we want to check, that we haven't seen in a while. Some inter-ethnic tension that really is not how we get down in this town. So we're going to share some stories today about how black and brown unity actually looks like, because we have a lot of history of that right here, and we've got the players to tell you those stories in a way that's very meaningful. First, we will hear a panel of young students who have actually brought the problem to our attention, right? And I want to highlight two co-sponsors that are important to this evening: the Bridge City Peace Collective and the Office of Violence Prevention. Why? Because it's our responsibility to figure out on the ground how to address this problem. This is the beginning of the conversation to make sure we are going in the right direction and helping some of everybody have that information, education as an antidote to division and conflict when solidarity is the order of the day. Right? We're going to allow them to introduce themselves. They'll have their own way they want to be introduced. And we'll have some other younger artists and other young voices coming forward in a little while. You're not interested? No. Okay, all right. Ty is, I don't know if y'all remember the New York Student Union. The New York Student Union was a group of students, black, brown, and white, that made some serious noise when they were together on the question of the fight for the return of our schools from state control. And they were catalytic and are ultimately bringing that victory home. Right? So Ty Marquez is going to have some words about that particular story. So the young folks that I'm very fond of, right, who were at Seton Hall a few years ago, they were known then as the Concern 44. Together fought for the reclamation of Africana studies and Latin American studies right up the hill at Seton Hall. Chris Duran and Miles are going to give you that story. A living, fresh example of what black and brown unity looks like. Right? Jessica Valladolid from the mighty Ironbound Community Corporation. Our warriors on the front of environmental justice, standing up to some serious forces of reaction in the fight against toxicity in the mighty East Ward. Some epic stories of black and brown unity and what that actually looks like in the here and now. Right? And behind him, I could barely see him, right there, the handsome young man with the shades on, the ACLU Joel Jackson, who's also the representative for the ACLU on our Civilian Review Board. Right? Joel is part of an important campaign called Counselors Not Cops, and the demilitarizing of our schools. Right? And some of the coalition members as a part of that epic fight make the road New Jersey some tough Latino youth who get down. Right? And some young folks up the hill of Maplewood, South Orange, and Maxwell Freedom School, and some others. He's going to tell that story about what black and brown unity looks like through that. And we've got a legend in the house. right? Someone that some of us have looked up to for a long time, right? When the mayor's father was having epic battles against racist gangsters in this town, right? Always promoting the question of the United Front. The epic year was 1969, right? The Young Lords came in North, and one of their leaders and founders was in the mix, right? And there was a united front between Amiri soldiers and Felipe Luciano's soldiers in those battles, and they were real battles. They were real battles in the heart of the North War, the battleground for those fights, right? And they represent one of our legendary stories of black and brown unity. Y'all ready for this? So I'm proud now to introduce, he needs no introduction, right? Our beloved mayor of the city of Newark, an education mayor who sees how and understands how, and it demands from all of us our responsibility to making sure we're doing what we need to do to make sure our kids are properly educated on the uplift and honoring of these traditions. Mayor Raz, Jew of Barack, y'all give him a round of
applause. Jump right in. I just want to just say welcome and thank everybody for coming out. Obviously, prayerfully we can make this the beginning of continued conversations that we have. I know there are some folks here because that's interesting to write about the fact that there was conflict, but it's not that interesting to write about us being together. So hopefully that narrative changes. When I was a child, my mother brought me to a church in New York City because a political prisoner was coming home, Puerto Rican political prisoner at that time. Her name was Lolita Lebron. And I was a child in a church, not knowing what was going on then, but as an adult, I clearly understand why she thought it not robbery to bring her children to see a Puerto Rican freedom fighter fight for the independence of Puerto Rico come home. And those memories stay with me. And so these kind of conflicts, as we talk about black and brown conflict, because it's important for us to say it, and black and brown unity, it's also important to say that our conflicts are a result of racism and white supremacy. It's important for us to note that's where it began. It's embedded in that. That most slaves that were Africans, I don't want to say slaves, because they were slaves when they got Africa. Most Africans that made it here, we actually, the United States or the colonies, got the fewer numbers. There were actually more Africans that went to the Caribbean, to places like Haiti and Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, and Cuba, and Brazil. In fact, Brazil has more Africans than any other country in the world outside of the continent of Africa itself. So it's important for us to know that as we grapple with this thing. So I want to begin by letting them introduce themselves. David Allen, Akila here, Haynes, and Rihanna Boutron. Hopefully I said it right. So we'll start from there and come there and give them an opportunity to talk, and then I'll ask a few questions.
Good evening. My name is David Allen, and I'm a junior at University High School. To start, I was told that the reason the youngest people on the panel are leading this discussion is so that we may set the tone for it. That being the case, I think it's important to acknowledge what really brought us all here. Prior to attending University High School, I was a student at the New School of Global Studies for about 3 years. It's kind of satirical, in a sense, that we're going to be sitting here talking about black and brown unity, because truthfully, I've never seen or experienced it. The racial divide in the city and in our school system is crystal clear. Anyone paying attention can see it. It's admirable that the students are leading today's conversation. But the mess we're in right now is a result of poor leadership. It's a result of the adults not holding themselves accountable and evading blame regardless of who suffers in the process of that. For global studies specifically, this conversation is a result of Nelson Ruiz and Superintendent Leone, two perfect examples of what a leader should not be. The more I got to know these men, the more I realized they couldn't care less about their students, nor the betterment of our school system. So when we're having this conversation today, and my peers share their experiences with this city and the North School of Global Studies, I want everyone to be aware that this is what happens when you put selfish, power-hungry men in charge. If there's a divide, which there clearly is, it's because of people like them, who feed that divide and nurture it. I hope today we can start the very long road to improving our community and holding each other accountable. Unity and love go hand in hand. And sometimes loving someone is forcing them to see their shortcomings so that they may become better. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Akilah Haynes. I currently attend university, and it is my personal belief that Black and Brown unity has never been shown within the North School of Global Studies. From the second I stepped foot in that environment my sophomore year, I felt the disconnect. It was clear that my terraced Black ass wasn't invited. I stayed because I was manipulated into thinking that the academic opportunities there would be far better than the school closer to my home, which turned out to be untrue. High school is supposed to be considered the best 4 years of your life, not the most dramatic. It's not supposed to be a big test or a nightmare. With that being said, I'm glad to be having this discussion today because although I have not seen it, I know that Black and Brown unity is necessary, especially in this city.
Hello, good evening. My name is Brianna Boltron, and I'm currently a sophomore at North School of Global Studies. I'm forever grateful to have an opportunity such as this to be both seen and heard respectively, to be told my opinion and what I have to say finally matters. The North Public School system is one I have grown up in, and for that, I may have some biases. I've grown up a victim to poor decision-making and improper leadership, but at North School of Global Studies, my eyes have been opened to how prevalent these issues really are, especially regarding racism. Black and Brown unity is a foreign concept to me. As a Black and Hispanic individual, no one understands the gross divide more than I do. To be seen as less than, as a threat, and then on top of that, to not be properly compensated for the emotional and sometimes physical trauma that comes with racism is truly the worst thing in the world. North School of Global Studies would rather protect its reputation than its students. And I believe this is an issue amongst the majority of schools in the North Public School District. As an issue I witnessed firsthand. It's a struggle being anything in Newark, a school, a business, a person. We will always be looked down upon simply because of the city we are from. This poses the question, if we are seen as all the same by those outside of Newark, why are we so divided to begin with? I am not ashamed of where I am from. I am not ashamed of the place I am currently receiving my education. I am ashamed of the fact that the opportunity to be better, to make the necessary changes, is there, but it's not being seized. The North Public School system is comprised of a tightly knit community, one that will do anything to protect each and every member. But are we as students not also members? Why is that same sense of loyalty not extended to us? Why as students do we have to hold those in charge accountable for failing to do their jobs? My only hope for this discussion is that it will help break down the barriers and will act as a catalyst for change. Thank you.
One thing we do know is that the education that they're getting is solid. That these people, at least they're getting it from somewhere, that they're brilliant, that are articulate, the ideas are clear. And while some might not agree with everything they say, we cannot disagree that it's filled with passion, a kind of reality that they've experienced, and it's something necessary that probably needs to be addressed, or definitely needs to be addressed by everyone. What I am sad about is the fact that all of them said they have not witnessed Black and Brown unity. That's saddening to me, given the household that I grew up in the community that I know, and seeing Miguel Pinero read poetry in my house, Miguel Alvarin at the New York Poets Cafe, and being friends with the welfare poets, and traveling the country, with Julio Diaz and Hector Rodriguez, and helping them to teach them teaching me Spanish in countries in Cuba and other places, trying to figure out, who I was as a young college student becoming a man. There's many revolutionary, conscious, beloved Latino brothers and sisters that were a part of our own individual development. So it saddens me. And one thing that David said, and I have a few questions, it's hard, that David said, which is true, is that we were all responsible for this. Not just the people he named, I know he's angry at them, but all of us, as adults, are responsible for the protection of these young people and the information that they receive and create the opportunities and programs. So that's why I'm excited to see people who are kids here as well. And it's our job to make sure that they know the experiences that we had and we share them with them openly and above board, that all of us share our experiences with them. And with the next panel on Felipe, I think he'll close it out and make us clear about some of the things that happened in the city of New York. So just a question that you can answer is, to me, what now? Like, what now? Like, what, if you had an opportunity, maybe this is a dangerous question, but I'm asking it anyway. What do you think should the adults here, what should we do, like, the minute this meeting is over? To help assuage your anger, anxiety, not to fix the problem, because we should be doing that, but what do you think? Just asking your suggestion and opinion.
I can answer to start. For those of you who didn't hear my opening, hi, my name is David. Personally, to reference what I said earlier, a lot of what we're seeing in our city now is a result of poor leadership, especially within our school system. There are people in positions of power who don't deserve to be there, and if it were up to me, I would correct that wrongdoing. Not only because they aren't doing their jobs, but because a number of them that I've experienced firsthand have inflicted trauma onto those students, and they have failed to live up to the duties their job actually requires. And I know personally, if I go to my job and I don't do what's required of me, I'm fired.
I agree with that, Master Hannah. On top of that, we need to figure out who aren't doing their jobs, and with the people who don't do their jobs, we need to make sure that they're dealt with, because it's very clear on who doesn't do what they're supposed to do. So it's not just one or two people, it's the whole system. You need to flush out who it is, because it's pretty evident. All you have to do is do evaluations, if you question the students. If you ask any student, what teacher doesn't do what they're supposed to do, they're going to sit there and tell you. If you ask a student, what's happened in the last year, they'll tell you. Because these students are ready to be heard. All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is come to them with an open hand.
Okay, I'm going to keep my statement brief because it's basically echoing the sentiments of my fellow peers here. But I feel as though we also need to start holding the people who we put in these positions of power to a higher standard. Because I feel like if they were allowed to get these positions of power and be able to abuse it to this extent, then the standard we were holding them to in the first place was clearly not high enough. The bar was not set high enough.
So, without getting into this, well, you say what you want to say. The incidents that took place over at the school, and there have been similar kind of things that have taken place in other places, but the incidents that took place over there at the school, and you guys are making some very serious demands and accusations. How do you think that should have been handled? How do you think that should have been handled?
I mean, again, actions have consequences. And the problem with the disciplinary actions, or lack thereof, that we've seen in that school specifically, you're allowed to get away with murder as long as you don't share a hue similar to mine. Non-black students are allowed to threaten to inflict harm upon other students. They're allowed to call them racial slurs. They're allowed to make black people feel like they aren't welcome in their own city simply because their skin is lighter than mine. And it really is as simple as that. It shouldn't have gotten this far.
What would you have done differently to resolve that?
When it first came into light,
I'm sorry, I was like, go ahead.
when it first came to light, then it should have been addressed. But, like, the principal should have been addressed. The superintendent should have been addressed. The lack of initiative is the problem. Nobody took any initiative at all. Nobody decided, hey, this is wrong. Let's try and fix it in any way, shape, or form. If there are certain students who are doing, if there are certain students who are doing things they shouldn't be doing, maybe it's time for them to go. If there are certain teachers who are doing something they shouldn't be doing, it's time for them to go. Same with principals, administrators, superintendents, anybody who aren't doing what they need to be doing, anything that's not getting done, they need to go. They've been should have gone. I mean, they should have been going. My apologies.
Okay. To be blunt, the issue isn't how the disciplinary measures were handled. The issue is that there were no disciplinary measures. There was no real consequence for what happened, especially at the North School of Global Studies, to give you an example. There were many issues brought upon not only to you, but to the superintendent, right, about the actions Mr. Ruiz has done or has failed to do regarding racism at North School of Global Studies. And not only did he face no sort of suspension, no sort of talking to, no sort of anything. And I believe that is the issue that we are presenting to you right now. The problem is that nothing was done, and we are asking that something be done.
To add on to what Akilah was saying, it shouldn't have gotten as far as the superintendent hearing reports of what was going on at the school. If I come to you and I say, this student called me the N-word and a monkey, and then 5 other students are saying, these students called me the N-word, a monkey, a terrorist, they threatened to inflict harm on me, they should be suspended. They should be expelled. At the very least, there should be some action taken to correct this behavior. And at a certain point, you can't blame it on ignorance or them not knowing. Because when someone is constantly calling you out of your name and is constantly threatening to inflict harm on you, they're saying it because they know it's wrong. It's not about being uneducated, it's about not caring that this is harmful.
And you can't chalk it up to ignorance not knowing at all. We have a history class. And in that history class, where we learn about what are the harmful things that are happening, or anything that's harmful towards black people or brown people, they took what they learned and they used it against us. We learned about Jim Crow and blackface. They decided to say, oh yeah, you look like the Jim Crow character in the picture that we just shown in the history class. We were sitting there arguing on whether or not slavery was good for the economy. Was Kyle Rittenhouse wrong in shooting up the people at that rally? That's not okay. And then when we brought it to the administration's attention, nobody cared. Nobody was there to help us.
It's been normalized to the point where racism is just another part of the culture, and it should have never gotten to this point.
Yeah, that's troubling, to say the least. But if you talk to, just on the other side, I've spoken to a few people that you're talking about. I spoke obviously to the principal, I spoke obviously to the superintendent, I spoke to a few of these people several times, in fact. They would argue that some of those kids were in fact suspended. They would say that some of the kids were suspended and removed from the school and so forth and so on. So how would you respond to that?
Prior to transferring, I was in that school every day. I don't mean to brag, but I did have perfect attendance. I know what students were there and what students weren't. So when the principal and these people are telling you that they did this and that, it's simply to cover their behinds to make themselves look good. Because if you're called out on negative behavior, you immediately jump to the defense. And again, conversations are great. We can all talk until we're blue in the face. but actions are what's needed. We've been having conversations for about 3 years now and nothing's changed.
On top of that, there was a time where a video got into my hands of some boy saying he was going to bomb the school. He yelled it out in the middle of the cafeteria. I sent it to the school page. That boy had went to that school as long as he wanted to, and he transferred to Barringer. Not because he was forced to transfer to Barringer, but because he wanted to. If somebody like me, my color, I'm dressed in the way that I'm dressed, was to say something like that, I would get transferred immediately. I would get put out immediately. I would be arrested immediately. So because of the color of his skin, or because of the culture in that school, he was allowed to get away with that.
Just keep it close away from your mouth. It's too close to your mouth.
So we want to share the mic. It's not, they don't suspend the students. I can tell you that, I wish I could have started recording this stuff. They don't suspend nobody. Nobody gets suspended. They didn't have detention. They didn't get expelled. They didn't get expelled, none of that. Nobody left the school at all unless you wanted to. And if you did, it wasn't because of, it wasn't because you were forced out. It was because of a choice of yours.
And to add on, as someone who currently attends North School of Global Studies, there will be no naming names, obviously, but there is a group of boys, about as much as me, who have been at the school since my freshman year, have never been suspended a day in their life. And when I tell you, every slur has to come out of their mouths, every last single slur. If you think of a slur in your head, and they have possibly said that, from calling black children terrorists, to saying we are N-words, to saying we do not deserve to live, to saying we all need to go back to our countries and they don't know why we're here. Out loud, in public, there was no secretiveness about it. Even towards teachers, these children were very racist, very racist. And they have been reported numerous times over the past 2 years since I've been there, since freshman year. And not once has any one of these boys been suspended or even spoken to. So when they are saying that they are suspending children, when they're saying that they are giving them consequences, I can tell you firsthand, no they are not. And they have never. And even when they have taken action far too late for it to even matter.
Interesting you said that. My father said to me a while ago, when he was around, that when people would tell him we need to go back where he came from, he would say that the airports would be crowded because none of us belong here. We have like 5 minutes before the next panel. I want to give you an opportunity to sum up anything that it is that you want to say before we move on to the next panel. Anything that you think you left out or something that you want to address. Get an opportunity to do that right now.
I found that people take these issues more seriously when it isn't just children crying wolf. I want to make it clear that if you are a black person in that building, if you are a brown person in that building, if you are a Muslim, visibly Muslim person in that building, you are going to be harassed. You are going to be called slurs. They are going to threaten to inflict harm on you, and no one is going to do a thing about it. Mostly because our leaders, not just in that building, but in this entire school district, many of them are cowards. They find it difficult to speak on uncomfortable conversations simply because they are uncomfortable. But anyone who has any semblance of sense knows that the uncomfortable conversations are the ones worth having.
Show an example of what he's talking about. Our algebra teacher, I would say, Mr. Mensa, they threw calculators at him in the middle of his teaching. One of the students threatened our Muslim teacher of taking off her hijab and stepping on it. Me personally, someone has vandalized my stuff, walked past me, bumped into me, and called me a nigger terrorist. This isn't anything new to any of us. This happens on a daily basis. At some point, you become numb to it. So when I have to tell people my story over and over and over again, I get that shocked face. I'm sitting there like, why are you shocked? It shouldn't be like that. This shouldn't be something that I'm used to, or any of us are used to. Any black student in that building should not have to be used to this.
I just want to make it very clear that this is not a witch hunt. We are not coming for people's heads just because. No, this is the result of something we have to constantly deal with on a daily basis. This is a result of years worth of unresolved, of unresolved conflict. And at the end of the day, if this is making you uncomfortable, then you should be. Because imagine how we feel in these situations. We are uncomfortable every day. We have to deal with this on a daily basis. We have to go to school feeling unsafe because no one wants to do anything about it. So yes, this is a conversation that needs to be had. This is a conversation that needs to make people who don't have to deal with what we deal with uncomfortable.
Let's give these students a round of applause, please. Thank you. You know, are they gonna say? Oh, okay.
As they get ready for their photo shot, as they transition to the next panel that we're going to bring up, where is Madam Dawn Haynes? All right, there you go. Right, you got your cards. Right, we're going to have a brief Q&A session after this. I'm in the way. Yeah, I'm in the way. That's right. Let me fix that. All right. She's going to come around with cards for Q&A. Right, so we'll get some questions in afterwards. We've got some guests in the house. I got to shout out just right behind me are some students who come in here from Howard University. Right? So how many years now? How many years have we been coming back and forth now? It's been a few years, right? Welcome to the city of Briggs, daughters and friends. Yes. We really appreciate that. That's another tradition we want to uplift. I'm going to return it back. Just one other thing. I didn't acknowledge two co-sponsors, right? Jonathan Austin and Great Ed Rowley, right? All Politics on Local Radio, right? Ed, the National Black Political Convention 2023. We're going to do it. Again, I wanted to do that. And for Equal Justice USA, that's the hat that I'm wearing today. Mr. Mayor,
if anyone has any questions that they want to ask at any time, just raise your hand and come over and invite them on here.
All right. Let's move to the second panel here. I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit, tell them who you are and, why you decided to be on the panel, I guess. And then I'll have a few questions for you as well.
Peace, everybody. All power to the people. Free all political prisoners and prisoners of war. My name is Chris Duran. I just graduated from NYU Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. I was an organizer with Center 44 at Seton Hall University along with my comrade Imani, and we've also worked on several political prisoner campaigns for the U.S. Held Political Prisoners.
Hello everyone, my name is Imani Miles. I'm a third-year student at Rutgers Law School. I'm also a member of the Concern 44, the student movement that came out of Seton Hall University, and that's really it.
Hello, my name is Thais Silva Marquez. I am a Newark native. I grew up in Newark, went to Science Park, Rutgers Newark. I'm one of the co-founders of the Newark Student Union that won local control for Newark Public Schools. I'm also an activist. An organizer, movement builder, primarily in the immigrant rights movement, and right now I'm helping to birth a youth-led movement for reparations.
Before we go, I'm going to ask the press to can we wait until this is over? Star Ledger, all you people, I know the part that you want to hear is done, but there's a whole panel of stuff going on, please. I wanted to make that point because we needed to let these young people say what they needed to say. It's important and clear that they needed to be able to do that. But you know, people are going to exploit that.
Right.
That's their job. Our job, we're not here because we want it to be exploited. We want, obviously, kids to be repaired for any injustice that happened to them and let them feel repaired. But we also have to fix this problem. Black and brown unity is key, is important for us, and we don't want that missed. So I'm sure that part ain't gonna be in the story, but you know, it will be in our story. So I appreciate it. Thank you. I just want to start when you heard what the young people said, and just an initial response. You know, I still got some response in my head. You know, I'm still fumbling with this stuff. So just an initial response from that, and what do you think is the cause of this kind of thing? And you know, just start there, and I'll ask another question.
Go first. I'm really deeply disappointed to hear about what's happening in the Newark Public Schools. I also have to say that this is nothing new. Racism in the Newark Public Schools has been existent since I was a student over 10 years ago. And so I've seen it. I haven't personally experienced it. I'm not Black, but what I do have to say is that there has been Black and brown unity in the city before, and I'm not here to paint a rosy picture of the racial politics that goes on in the city, but there is a history of the ways that our communities have worked together to fight systemic injustice. We are all impacted by the same systemic racism that impacts our communities, and we all have a shared stake in working together to fight white supremacy, because this nation needs to come to a reckoning. This has been a problem historically. Until we reckon with the history of genocide in this country, until we reckon with enslavement, we won't be able to move forward together. And so our communities need to come together. And I know that it's easier said than done. I can say as a Latina, my community has a lot of internalized racism. That is a conversation that we need to have within our own communities to understand the ways that colorism and racism seep through. And I think that what's happening in Newark Public Schools is just another example of the ways that my community, the Latino community, really needs to reckon with its racism.
Unfortunately, colorism has affected all of our communities, in the Black community as well. It's affected all of us because white supremacy doesn't make white people feel superior, it makes us feel inferior. So the proximity to power and the proximity to whiteness makes people feel empowered. So they try to be as close to power as they can, or as close to whiteness as they can, because the opposite means devaluing themselves. So that's what we mean by educating people. Go ahead.
I would just like to say that I stand in solidarity with everything that the students are advocating for. I would say that if you are a public official, if you are on the Board of Education, if you are a teacher, you have a duty and an obligation to listen to these students. Understand that there is no education system if it's not for these students. They go to school every single day. They understand their lived realities more than any person making a decision about their future will. So when I say I stand in solidarity with you, know that I'm not the only one. All of these students here, I'm not the only one who stands in solidarity with you. There are so many people who are ready and willing to help you in your struggle. So if y'all have demands, don't be afraid to make them, because you're not going to be making them alone.
Yeah, I think, part of the problem is also that a lot of these things, these kind of fights against colonialism have to be done in an organized way. There's a huge generational divide between generations that have knowledge of the history of anti-colonial movements and even the continuing anti-colonial movements around the world in countries like Cuba, in countries like Nicaragua that still, hold down, these kinds of movements. But a lot of youth intentionally have been separated from that today. A lot of generations after COINTELPRO have been separated from that today. The reason why we have political prisoners. And so we have a lot of folks who, especially if they're first generation immigrants, they come to the United States and they receive a miseducation along with anyone else who's a colonized person in the United States. And they aren't able to even deal with colonialism as it has happened within their own countries. You know, I know many generations in my own family will call themselves, oh, we're Spanish. I say, well, you speak Spanish, but, you know, your ancestors are not from Spain. But, you know, again, that proximity to whiteness, that proximity to Europe, and then having a Eurocentric education, you know, helps reinforce that. And then you have colonized people within this country who decide to, you know, think that their fight is against, Afro-descended people or other colonized people, and, you know, they don't think that it's against, you know, this capitalist colonial system that, you know, the same dollar that a lot of these administrators are making, you know, their careers off of, you know, is made from the devaluing of, you know, us collectively. And so when students are talking about problems with administration and the fact that there's no accountability, we have seen this problem, whether it's like where I went to high school, at Columbia High School, you know, I'm sure where, you know, when Imani was in high school also, we've seen it in our undergrad, you know, and even in our undergrad, you know, we put together this coalition of organizations to like form the Concern 44 that was representative of Black and brown people on campus. But the fact is, a lot of Latinos did not get behind that. And a lot of Latinos hated like other Latinos for siding with like Black folks at that university. So it wasn't like this rosy picture like everyone was all like solidarity automatically. You know, you have to struggle in an organized way to like build it. And you have to struggle against, again, the tendency towards Europe that a lot of Latinos have. And again, a lot of the administrators in these, you know, if we have miseducation in these schools, it's a lot of times because there are also misleaders who don't have the curriculum, who don't have the care for students. You know, there are so many teachers and social workers that work in schools who do not, you know, they hate working with students. And honestly, they should go find another job in accounting or something. Like, you know, go do something else. Because ultimately, if you're there, you know, to empower students, and I mean, that's what the school is supposed to be there for. That's what the students are there for. And it's really disappointing to hear this, but it's also not unfamiliar.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you went to high school in Columbia, so you could, Columbia High School, so it could be made clear that this is not a problem germane to Newark. This is a statewide problem, and you know it's a little sexier for folks to say it's just Newark, but it's the statewide issue. More importantly, New Jersey is like the fourth most segregated state in the nation. The school system is the fourth most segregated. In fact, more than half of Black and brown kids go to schools that are more than 90% Black and brown. Which makes the conflict even that much more ridiculous since we are both segregated in school systems in New Jersey. And in the other half, the majority of those people go to schools that are at least 70% Black and brown. So we're segregated mostly in the state of New Jersey by race and class because our neighborhoods are segregated. We don't live with each other. That's just real. I do want you to talk, however, about instances of Black and brown unity that you've been a part of and experienced and what it took to get there, just piggybacking off what the brother talked about. What did it take to get you to that point?
I can talk about my experience in the Newark Student Union. I think until this day, even though it's been almost a decade since I graduated, is one of my proudest life achievements is to have been a part of that movement. And it made me so deeply disappointed and sad to hear that the students have never experienced Black and brown unity, given the Black and brown unity we saw during Newark Student Union. So I remember when I was a sophomore, Mark Zuckerberg had given that however many millions dollar gift to the Newark public school system, and I remember being like, great, we're gonna get new computers, we're like gonna do this and that, and then that very same year, they were gonna slash another couple millions of dollars from our school budget, and I remember asking myself, how does that make sense? And that kind of like birthed this conversation about how Newark Public Schools, we didn't have local control because people all the way at the top of our government, including Chris Christie, who was the governor of that time, didn't believe that black and brown people, parents, kids, students, teachers, they didn't believe that we should have a say over the type of education that our community needs. And we felt that injustice. I mean, that was like white supremacy at its peak. And whether you went to Science Park or Behringer or wherever, we all saw the shared stakes of fighting for an education that was catered to us, that we had a say over. And that was a many years long fight to win local control. I mean, it was 24 years of white people at the top level of government saying that black and brown people shouldn't have a choice. And we won. We had almost every year, every single high school in Newark was walking out. We shut down. 2,000 students sat down on Route 21 to shut down the highway going towards the airport. We were getting on national news. We occupied, Cammie Anderson was the superintendent of the time. We occupied her office for 3 days. And we won because we came together across race. It was a multi-generational, multi-racial movement that said that Newark, we deserve to have a good education. We deserve to have leaders who reflect our needs. And what I want to say to you all here is that, like, learn from that. Learn from organizing, from protesting, because you can win if y'all come together to hold these leaders accountable. If teachers aren't listening to your concerns, you have a power, you have a say. It was incredibly brave for you to come here today and share your lived experience, and you can organize. Go sit in if you have to at the superintendent's office. We did it. Go shut down highways. Like, y'all could have a really powerful education because your voice deserves to be a part of it.
Anybody else want to respond? Just yeah.
Yeah, when you asked that question, or when the students made that statement in the last panel, I was like, let me reflect, because I think when I was in high school, I didn't see black and brown unity. I barely saw black unity at that point. And that's another conversation. That is a part of this conversation. But when I was at Seton Hall, and my very first recollection of what true black and brown unity looked like was taking my first Black Studies course and learning about the Third World Liberation Front at both San Francisco State College and UC Berkeley. And the solidarity that those students, from La Raza and the BSU and those student groups, the solidarity that they created, they understood the conditions that they were faced with as students and the necessity in politicizing their peers to the fact that their conditions are a result of the same racist, colonialist, imperialist oppressors, and the need to unify around that struggle. I think, for me at least, as a student who was becoming radicalized through Black Studies, looking at the conditions on my campus, the lack of funding for the Black Studies department, the lack of program at that time, the lack of funding and curricular autonomy for the Latinx Studies program. For me, that was a way to kind of struggle towards building black and brown unity. And I don't necessarily know if we did that, to be transparent, at Seton Hall with the Concern 44, but I do know that we made advancements towards it. And I remember after we had taken over the administration building, this was, really as things started to settle in, someone from the Muslim Student Association reached out to us. They said, we've been having these struggles on campus as Muslim students. We don't have a prayer room. If y'all don't know, Seton Hall is a Catholic institution. It's Catholic, it's white, and it's racist. There's Three things you gotta remember: Catholic, white, and racist. And to be a Muslim student, and to be a black Muslim student at that, you can understand the struggle that comes with that. And we had a meeting together, and I'm listening to them, and I'm thinking about the Third World Liberation Front and how their struggles revolved around the students' needs. And that was my first example of Black and Brown unity. My true first example of Black and Brown unity, how we were able to sit there and have a conversation. And I'll be honest, those concerns, those demands, that movement that we were intended to build, it never actually materialized. But at least in that moment, I got a pictured image of how powerful we could be if we created a joint movement, maybe off of the foundation of the Rainbow Coalition, or, the solidarity that Cuba has had with Africa. I'm thinking about that because I'm going to Cuba in a few days. But that solidarity that has been unwavering, undying solidarity. And, hopefully, working with the law school now, I can, create that, I can work to create that Black and Brown unity.
I want to ask, so we get ready we got to wrap up soon. In Florida, so you can answer that, but also you guys can chime into this last word. In Florida, Governor DeSantis banned the African studies, African American studies, and so on. In Arkansas, I believe Governor Huckabee Sanders banned the use of the word Latinx. You can't use the word Latinx. So these are the same people, and we all are their enemy, right? So the point I wanted to make too is how, and I think you touched on it, that's why I asked you a little bit, how do we begin to, because I think some of the problem that young folks are having is that, first of all, we need to address the issues that they have, like the injustice that they serve. We have to give them justice. But ultimately, I think people believe that the problem is an individual problem and not a systemic one. So I want us to talk about the systemic problem that creates this environment as opposed to just these individuals who are doing things wrong, right? So, which is different. That's all. But when you guys think jump in, if y'all want to say something, please do it in the last words.
Yeah, I think going to the last question, like, for example, also, like Imani, the way that I learned about a lot of Black and Brown community and like, the history of that was learning about the Young Lords and Black Panthers in like Africana Studies classes. But the model of organizing that groups like this used, that they had like principles of unity, so that then they had contradictions that they defined against the overall system, and that they could all relate to within their own communities. But it was on that basis that they then had principles struggle with each other to actually handle those internal contradictions and force out a lot of the patriarchal tendencies that happen in those groups and in these communities, and the white supremacist tendencies that happen as well. A perfect example is in the development of the Young Lords Party and the Young Lords Organization. But I think that, again, going to that point of recognizing it as a systemic problem is understanding that, and we also kind of had done this through like our organizing, is that connecting all these experiences and all the racist incidents that happen on our campus to larger problems with the institution itself, so that we're not just reacting to individual cases where we're looking for accountability for this one person, but that we could actually push proactively a set of demands that can challenge power at the university and also redirect power to the students and to the off-campus community themselves. One of the biggest demands that were on the programs from Young Lords and the Black Panther Party was community control. And so that's one of the things that we also emphasized in our demands, was having students be in charge of who gets hired at the university, be in charge of reviewing administration at the university, having them accountable to the larger community and students on campus, especially those who are teaching us.
It's so systemic. Like we obviously need to address what's going on in Newark because it's clearly a problem, and students should never feel unsafe in schools, ever, period. That relates to gun violence, racism, etc. But these people at the top, DeSantis, Huckabee, Trumps of the world, they're trying to erase us. They're trying to erase us from history. They're trying to erase our voices, but they are replaceable. Every single person in power is replaceable. And we have the power to get new people in office. We have the power to really force people to listen if they're not listening. We have so much more power than these people ever want us to acknowledge, and we have to step into this long legacy of resistance that exists in Newark and the United States. There's always been people fighting for power, for liberation, for freedom, not for Black people and for all people. And so we have a legacy to protect, we have a legacy to step into, and I really want us to be grounded in that we have the power to change laws, we have the power to replace people who are racist in government or in our own communities. And so, organize is my message.
All right, let's give them a round of applause, please. They did an outstanding job. Thank you. We have, who's coming up now? Just come on up and introduce yourself and get up there.
So I'm going to collect the questions from people as well.
So I'm just going to allow you guys to jump right in, just introduce yourself, and just have a response to the last two panels you heard. So, all right.
Hi folks. Hi, I am JB, the pronoun that I use is JB. And I am the frontline communications person for the Ironbound Community Corporation Environmental Justice Movement out of the Ironbound Newark. And just first responses, I'm still gripped by the first introduction, really setting the tone. How do you even follow that? I almost feel like, look at us taking up the space of young people really sharing from the heart. So, first impression.
Hey everybody, my name is Joe Johnson. I am the policy counsel for the ACLU in New Jersey. Very much appreciate being part of this conversation. To kind of identify myself. I identify as a Black man, father is Black, mother is white, son of Puerto Rican, so I'm somewhere mix of all that. And I share a very similar response, right? When we first heard the original high school students up here speaking, it's an incredibly difficult act to follow, right? I mean, I remember being 17, 18 years old, and I think that I had an aversion to authority at the highest level, right? I don't know if I would have been comfortable coming up here right next to the mayor and saying some of these things, right? So definitely, hearing from the students specifically is incredibly powerful. And what I say, especially working in the education policy space, is that far too often it's a room full of adults trying to make a decision about students, about the issues that students face, and about the solutions that students should have to deal with. Where what we really need to be doing is having conversations specifically with the students. Because we don't know the issues that they face on a daily basis. We don't know what the best solution would be. We can sit in a room amongst ourselves and look at what somebody did in another state, what they did in another high school, but that might not address the issues that we're seeing right here in Newark. And Mayor, one thing that you said that I'll add on to is, you said this is not a Newark issue, this is a New Jersey issue. And I go one step further to say this is not just a New Jersey issue, this is a society issue. Even individually, we're not taught our histories, right? And to go even further than that, we are not taught how our histories intersect and how they overlap. And I think that really is the part of this conversation that's most important. And for the students, this might be the first time that you're having a conversation about what does Black and brown unity mean, what does it look like? This is something that you have to learn about it every day for the rest of your life. It's not, you're not going to walk away from this and be like, okay, I get it, Black and brown unity. You're going to have to see this. You're going to have to put the work in to make sure that it's actually happening in your community. And what I will highlight is just yesterday, I was at a conversation down in Trenton that was being hosted by the United Black Agenda. And it was the same exact conversation. A room full of adults that all work at social justice organizations trying to make the state a better place. And we had to sit down and take an entire day and start from the beginning. What is the history of our people? Where have we overlapped? Where have we intersected? How have we gotten together to get over the hurdles that face us, right? And I think if you take one thing from what I have to say or from this entire panel, is that if we fight amongst ourselves, the people in power will never have to do anything. Because until we can present a unified front on what the issues are and what the solutions are, they're going to wash their hands up and say, well, that has nothing to do with us. Let them fight amongst themselves until they can figure it out. And that's always how it's going to be. So it hurts and it sucks that so much of the burden is placed on students to be able to do this work. But that's the reality of the scenario. You have to realize we're in it now. Let's do the work. And you don't need to only do the work with somebody that looks like you. They don't have to have the same race. They don't have to have the same religion. One of the statement that the great Reverend Eric Dobson down at Fair Share Housing left us yesterday at the end of the conversation was that your race, your religion, your nationality, your ethnicity, that all informs who you are. And it is incredibly important, but that does not define who you are. What defines you is how you interact with all of your fellow human brothers and sisters, not just the people that share the same exact ideas as you. So it's going to be a lifelong process of really trying to get over the hump of how do we get on the same page? And sometimes it's going to be really difficult. Sometimes you might have to swallow your pride. Sometimes they might have to swallow their pride. But it is work and it's going to continue on a daily basis for the rest of your lives. And this is a great starting point. I'm sorry that you're dealing with so much of these issues in the school, but I tell you what, it is preparing you for what the real world really looks like.
Right.
And now is the time for you to really start working on it here in your community. That way you can expand on the work that you do now and take it out and you lead more. Because as I said, this is a societal issue. It's not a Newark issue. It's not a New Jersey issue. This is something that is going to face you every single day out in the real world. So thank you so much for you all being here and for the folks that spoke for being so willing to share your experiences.
So just the work that happens down at ICC, the work that you're involved in, engaged in, and just a little bit about that, and you know, who are the people that you represent and protect, and who's a part of that coalition?
Yeah, I felt like I didn't take up enough time in my first answer, but these are the same things. I almost feel like this could be a strategy session. The Ironbound community is, I love starting with the history of just Newark in general. 67 happens, there's the Newark Rebellion over the same things that we're talking about now. Police violence, displacement of whole Black neighborhoods, or even universities and hospitals that we have now. And since 67, some of the things that we're also dealing with in the work that I'm involved in is the environmental racism that's experienced in the Ironbound in particular, but also throughout many of the same looking neighborhoods throughout our city and our state and our country, which all tend to be low wealth Black and brown communities. So when I think about it as a strategy session, some of the things that we've fought and strategized around together as a community have been fighting for over 30 years to say we deserve quality education because that is part of ICC Ironbound's legacy of having a daycare system. But what is a great education without thinking about the whole person and their health as well? And so fighting things like the pollution that tends to get saturated into our sane-looking communities for decades. So the incinerator that we have here in New Jersey happens to be placed in a low-wealth Black and brown community. Most recently, thinking about strategy, we've had the support of our Honorable Mayor to have over 20 legislators sign off to say that they're opposed to adding a fourth power plant to our neighborhood that is only 4 square miles. We've already got 3. So I think of that as unity, as just speaking for myself, since I feel like it got personal here, that it's our generation and ourselves that are doing a lot of the work of decolonizing ourselves. of thinking, what are these things that my parents and grandparents didn't talk about or didn't let go of, that is a struggle for ourselves to do every day too, so that we can have this amount of unity and the kind of turnout that we've had for people to, maybe they haven't talked about environmental justice, maybe they think of it honestly as a white thing, as let's save the whales or save the bears, but here we are, Black and brown communities dealing with it firsthand. So I'll leave it there.
I want y'all to, I want you to say whatever it is you need to say before we bring these other guys on. I really wanted you to cap off, what those two panels talked about. Just really put a lid on it in terms of like your perspective of us going forward, what we need to do.
I think that the main thing that we need to do is have. I think the main thing that we need to do is to make sure that this is an iterative thing, right? We can't have this conversation one time and then send a bunch of students out into the world and expect that you'll be able to deal with all of this. There's a lot of trauma that comes with the experiences that you're all facing, and we need to make sure that we are creating a space that allows for us to learn from the students. Because it's not enough to give them the microphone for 10, 15 minutes and then walk away at the end of the day. It's not. We need to have these conversations far more frequently, and we can't wait until there's some type of tragedy or some type of violent action or something that occurs before we start doing it. Because we know that the students are dealing with these issues. This is not a surprise to us. These are issues that most of the folks in this room have dealt with. Now, you might not remember what you were dealing with when you were 17 or 18. Or you might have been caught up by how things might have got worse as you became an adult. But those type of jaded, just let the kids figure it out, that's not going to help. That's going to put the children into the same cycle that we've been stuck into. So the more that we can give back to the community by having these conversations with students early and making sure that we're addressing the issues at the root of the issue, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, right, giving a student detention, giving a student a suspension, that's a back-end fix. It's not a solution. It's a Band-Aid that we now need to do something because something bad happened. We need for our schools and for our government to be willing to do something before something bad happens. And these conversations will allow us to figure out what we can do. So let's do this again next one.
Thank you. It makes me think that organizing sounds like this just big word, like a lot of things sound like big words for no reason. Organizing to me is just having a spark moment where something that you hear about really matters to you and continuing to talk to more people about it as much as you can. So again, like just reflecting that it's not this moment in isolation, it's an echo of these conversations. So I'm on board and just echo what you shared.
Thank you. We appreciate us giving you a round of applause, please. I do want to, say that what David said at the beginning, that we got to have uncomfortable conversations, and I'm sure that the statements that they made in the beginning made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. And there are going to be people that are upset with me because I gave them the opportunity to say it. But I think they do need the opportunity to say this over and over again, whether we agree with it or think it's the right way to be delivered or not. I think it's important for us to hear it in all of this anger and fury. It's important for us to hear that. I do want to say that clearly the same people that benefited from oppressing coal miners in Harlan County in Kentucky are the same people who benefited from the slave trade, that shepherded millions of Africans over to the United States, are the same people, right, who put up signs that say no dogs are Irish allowed. These are the same people, right? These are the same people who poisoned Pedro Albizu Campos for wanting Puerto Rico to be independent. These are the same people. And when we begin to understand that they are the same people, then we'll be clear who our friends and our enemies are. So the next panel, the next person is Felipe Luciano. Come on here, my brother. I'm going to let Felipe introduce himself. I'm going to do him a good service if I even attempt to do that. But I love him. He's a close family friend, but more importantly, he's...
Hello.
One, two.
If you only knew, and I'm talking specifically to the students here, with their faces all. If you only knew how proud I am of sitting next to a black mayor of a major city, if you only knew how long this took. You see, his father, Leroy Jones, who became Amiri Baraka, came here in he started Black Arts Movement in 1964, but in 1969, this was an Italian town. Let me make this clear to you. It was an Italian town. The North Ward controlled everything. Black folks in the Central Ward had nothing to go on. And let me make it clear, they also had guys running through here, I call them the White Citizens Council, with guns threatening me and his father because we were voting and we wanted a guy named Kent Gibson to run for mayor. That was unheard of. Unheard of. You want what? This was a town that was run by white folks. And may I say to my chagrin, Latinos, Puerto Ricans were all in accordance with the North Ward. If you said they were black, they would cut you 3 ways, long, deep, and serious. That's how bad it was. Going into the Iron Bound was a problem. Barringer High School, which I just heard about, was all white. I'm telling you, we couldn't. It was in the North Ward. It was difficult walking through there. When I came here and started working with Amiri Baraka, Imam, they told me don't even think of going to the North Ward. So I just want to give you a sense. This is a history that we need to know, because if you don't know the history, you don't see the achievements. You shouldn't go around thinking of yourself as inferior, as being from Newark, from Newark. What?
That's right. That's right.
This is an incredible town. You need to make it even more incredible. You need to build this town until the United States understands, until the New York Times starts writing about it, until the Daily News starts writing about it. I'm almost sorry I left it because I was working here with the mayor, and it was an incredible experience. Now, some history. There was here the establishment of inferiority. Remember that most of the people in Newark who came from the South were Southerners, and they were rural people. And I've always loved Newark because of that. Black folk here are so hospitable, are so Southern. I had a ball here. I really did. Come on in here, boy, eat some collard. I loved it here. I had a wonderful time. The Puerto Ricans here are from the country. They're country people, they're heroes. It was deep. But never the twain were me. They weren't me. And I used to wonder why. Why is it that they're not coming together? 2 reasons. First of all, Puerto Ricans here really thought that they had nothing to do with black people. They were not black. Where did all humankind start? Thank you. It all started there. And so we weren't given a sense as, but the Spaniards were the first to tell us that we were not good enough. They told us that if you were black, you could not get the privileges according to a lighter skinned child. We still have that problem among Puerto Ricans. I think one of the gentlemen said it. We call it adelantar la raza. You shouldn't be marrying a black person. In the old days, here in Newark and in New York City, if you brought put a black man in your house and you a Puerto Rican girl, you got not only a whipping, you almost got killed. How you gonna have your child growing up black? By the same token, there were some black folk here who, as nationalists, didn't understand what cultural nationalism means. It's pride in yourself, but not putting somebody down. We had that problem too. So it was difficult. When I see white Latinos, lighter-skinned Latinos, talking socialism, oh, my heart beats with such pride. I love that stuff because that is able to get you out of this race thing that is killing us. And while you're talking all this nonsense, it's not nonsense, but when you're talking about people calling you the N-word, there's a guy named Trump who said he wants retribution. Folks, we are facing a horrible problem in this country. We may lose this country. I know you don't know what fascism is, but ask some of the elders, ask some of your Jewish seniors, ask them what happened in Germany, what happened in Poland. Ask what happened. As it turns out, I went to public school, most of them were Ashkenazi Jews. And when I used to talk to them about what happened, they used to tell me, Philip, my name was Philip, they would tell me, you have no idea what it is to be afraid that someone's going to come through your door in the middle of the night and kill your mother and your father because you went against him. Didn't we have a Holocaust survivors thing here? It was unbelievable. It was attended by everybody. But I was taught by Jews, never again. Children, let me tell you something. I love every one of you. You must begin to reach out. In this community, so even if it hurts, in this community, you have to find those Latinos and go to them. By the way, this is mainly a problem for us as Latinos. You have to go into those kids who are running those things. The manager here is Latino, right? Habla con ellos. Why did you say that to that person, man? What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? You have to stand up against Latino racism. You can't stand there and let it happen. No, porque yo no quiero meterme. Stop it. The same way when you hear someone black talking about a Puerto Rican or a Latino, say, man, why don't you stop that nonsense? Stop it. You are an agent. You are required by God and by man to stop the nonsense. It has to start with you. Now, the history. In 7-11, black men took over Spain. Let me make this clear. And they were Muslim. I didn't say black men and women took over Spain. And for 750 years, there were no major wars in Spain. For 750 years, more than Pax Romana, which was supposed to be the biggest thing since 500 years. The Italians had no wars. Spain was free. You could be Catholic, you could be Jewish, you could be Muslim, and it was all good. And Spain rose, became one of the greatest powers on the earth. In 1492, the KKK, Ferdinand Isabel, decided, wait a minute, we can't have these black people run our country. And they came from the north and took over Spain. And from that day on, Spain has fallen down and has not recovered. What has Spain contributed to the world? Picasso. That's about it. It's sad. African kingdoms came and went. Folks, the first thing we have to do is get these children to travel.
Yes.
We got to get them to travel. Once a Puerto Rican goes to Senegal, he's going to fall on his knees and cry. Once he goes to Mali, to Ghana, the head of the golden, we call it the golden kingdom. Once you begin to see what it is, it'll flip you out. No Puerto Rican can stand under the weight of that. We didn't get black people to go to Puerto Rico. You have no idea what paradise is. Santo Domingo. It's beautiful. Once you see it and see the love that people have, you're not going to be the same person again. You may even fall in love. May happen. Sisters, don't get mad when black men fall in love with Latina women. There's another problem we have. Well, they think they white. Because she got hair. Stop the bullshit! Cut it out! He likes it, that's his business. None of your business. We get caught up in this nonsense. And when a Puerto Rican person falls in love with a black person, the parents jump on them. We have to defend those children. You can't stop love. You can't stop it. Look at him. A perfect example. He was Puerto Rican, I told you he's Puerto Rican. Mother's white, father's black. He's Puerto Rican, he just moves. We have an opportunity here in Newark, particularly if we start hiring more men, black and brown men in those schools. If we start teaching Puerto Rican history, it's incredible. It's not that just like these but we were fighting the Spaniards for way before. Columbus did this, you don't need to discover anything. There was Taínos there already. When you read the history of what really happened, we talk about the British, and we watch Django, and we watch all these movies, and it's horrible. You have no idea of how cruel the Spaniards were. No idea. They were very cruel. And we still think, well, okay, you're saying, I'm Latin. Stop. We have Ponce de Leon and Colón in statues. Would Jews have Hitler in Israel in the middle of Tel Aviv?
Absolutely not.
That's what he was. If we continue this fight between blacks and Latinos in this town, you're going to lose this town. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose the history of black mayorship. You're going to lose. This man next to me he gave free mortgages to people. We didn't have city control of this. He was the one who started it. We had to fight them, and they were on him. They were trying to put microphones in him. They tried to do everything to hurt this man. And he stayed the course. He lost a few elections. He didn't give up. I'm telling every one of you right now, the moment you give up, you lose. The moment you give up, you lose. Pick up a book on Puerto Rican history. There's a book by a guy named Nelson Dennis called War Against All Puerto Ricans. It's deep. It's deep. It will show you why the United States doesn't want to give up that island. It's a militarily strategic point. They don't want to give that up. I wish you would read more about what happened here in this country between the colors, black folks and Native Americans. Andrew Jackson could never beat them. He tried as much as possible to go and recover the lost slaves. And Osceola, the chief of the Seminoles, said, "You want a what?" And he said, "I want all the black people in your village." He said, "You must want, that's my wife. I didn't give up my wife, fool." They fought. They married each other, they talked to each other, and they never beat. There is something in us that looks to fail. You have to believe in yourself. Believe me, I know what you're doing. I was there once. We had parental problems. Mother said, "You ain't never gonna do nothing. You ain't never gonna be nothing." I love my mother, but she was abusive. We go around thinking we're nothing, and if you individually think that, it emanates outside. You understand what I'm saying? People can feel it when you don't feel good about yourself. I don't see another person in here. I don't see them. Maybe it's because from my belief system, which is democratic socialism, I think everybody's cool. Look. In 1969, his father was going through hell. And he had developed, there was a guy named Tony Imperiale, who was head of the, I call it White Citizens Council here. Older people will remember this. They used to run through these streets with guns and never got